Well, welcome back to the Minimalist Home Podcast. Today, I am super duper excited. We are talking all about what you need to do to prepare for Christmas, Hanukkah, although Hanukkah's probably passed by now, but just anything that you're doing right now during this very busy time of the year. And I am joined by a very special co-host, my dear friend, Lindsay. She is a relationship coach and she is my friend. And Lindsay and I, welcome, Lindsay.
Hey, I'm so excited.
Lindsay and I have known each other for a long time. We have been nurses together. And in between taking care of patients, we would sit down and chat about all things. And she, of course, was just like loving relationships and stuff. And I was always like, you need to start a podcast. And then I started one. She is starting one. And I was always like, I'll come and chat with you on your podcast. And here I have her chatting with me on mine. So, Lindsay, I'm so glad that you are joining me as a co-host today.
I'm so glad, and thank you for having me. And that is real life that we have been talking about this for years, and now it's actually happening. So it's very exciting.
It is. I am thrilled. And it's funny, too, because, yeah, like we always talk all things. We're in the same city, and here we are on Zoom call chatting together. So.
So much easier. So much easier.
You know what? I was just thinking the same thing. It is. And I really want to talk about helping people to prepare for the upcoming stuff that is coming in. Now, Lindsay, when you think about Christmas, and because you celebrate Christmas and I do, and what do you think of when you get gifts? Do you ever think, oh my gosh, like I did not even realize that I was now going to have to find homes for these things?
I feel like that's what I used to think. And now I'm a little bit more prepared. No, I shouldn't say that. I'm mentally prepared, but I don't actually clear the space to make room for the things. But now it's no surprise when I bring things home that I have more stuff now.
I like that you said that you're mentally prepared because I think that is a big, big part of it. And I know that for years when my kids were little and all of a sudden, and I've talked to you before about this, my husband's love language is gift giving. And what my issues are around. Yeah. And, when Lindsay does her podcast, she will be getting into that. But for me, that is such a challenge because for him, he would be like, oh my gosh, we don't have enough gifts for the kids. And then he would buy like a ton of gifts for the kids. And Christmas would come and all of a sudden you then have all of this stuff you have to buy home or find homes for. And we seem to forget that every single year.
Yeah, that's a real thing. That is a real thing. And even though I am mentally prepared, like I said, that doesn't mean that I have a plan. It's just that I'm not surprised. And that is one of the many things that happen like year after year. We're like, oh yeah, this thing's happening again. But we haven't actually done anything about it. So good that we're having this talk.
Yeah. And I think the interesting thing is, so before, even now, if I am given gifts, if I say somebody gave me like a ton of clothes, well, all of a sudden, if I go to put all of those clothes in my closet, then where are they going? Maybe I don't have room. And a lot of people listening, like maybe you don't have room. Maybe you don't have room for the things that people are giving you. For me, the first thing that comes to mind is always the kitchen, because the kitchen, there's finite space. And often people's kitchens are full. Like my mom, she's in an apartment. She has a very small kitchen. And if I was to give her like a new appliance or anything, that would be a challenge for her to find the space for that. So I like that you said first, mentally, I am prepared. So you're at least like, know that that's coming in. And that is the first thing I want to mention to people is to be like, oh, wait a second. There's going to be stuff that's coming in and just be aware that, okay, I'm going to have to find a home for that. So that's the first thing. So
yeah. And like when you talk about appliances, that my fiance and I are wanting an air fryer for Christmas. And that was like, I like measured on the counter. I was like, can this even go anywhere? Is that a realistic thing to want in our kitchen? Turns out it was. And yeah, that's gonna be some shuffling that needs to happen.
Oh my gosh.
Should we get that? Should someone buy that for us?
Should someone buy that? Right. Of course.
Yeah.
Santa, are you listening?
Yes.
And you know what? I'm really glad to hear you say that you measured that, because that's just it. Like now, before, when I would shop, when I would give people gifts, anything, I just didn't even think, where is this going to go? And now, before I buy anything, I'm like, where is this going? Which is so helpful. And that is the thing. And right now, I want to point out, in my office right now, it is so messy compared to what it normally is. Like behind me, I have this elephant, which is in my living room normally, and that bench, which is in our entryway. And so normally when I decorate for Christmas, I take a lot of the decorations and I put them in the totes that the Christmas decorations come out of. And yet there still has to be some shuffling, and my office seems to be the place where things have gone. And it made me realize that there still is more stuff in this house that I don't even necessarily want or want to get rid of. And it's very interesting. A lot of times when people decorate for Christmas or whatever, like their house is messy. And that is what I'm realizing. Oh my gosh, like we have all of this extra stuff. Now, you just decorated for Christmas.
I did yesterday.
Yes.
And it's very minimal. Very minimal. We have our cat, and he does not allow for a Christmas tree. So we have a tiny little Christmas tree on top of the fridge. And yeah, we just keep it like super minimal, which feels really good. The rest of things are not that minimal, but the Christmas decorations are, so that's a win.
I love that. I didn't even know you put it on top of your fridge. That's hilarious. I love that. Barbara, he is quite the guy. Mm-hmm. Quite the cat. Okay, so in that being said, now recognizing, like in my whenever we would go like to my grandparents for Christmas, or my family had Christmas, or just even in my own house as an adult, the living room was so messy after Christmas Day, probably until New Year's, basically until the tree came down. And I think that the main issue for that, and I remember like at my grandparents' house in particular, like the presents that were now unwrapped would be sitting under the tree for a long time. And I think that truly is because people were like, well, I don't know where this is going to go. And I now, like my whole point of minimalism, like why I am so like kind of, I don't want to say obsessed with it. My family would say I'm obsessed with it, but why is because I recognize, like, I actually just saw the physiotherapist today, and I said to her, I'm so discomfort averse. Like, I was like, if something is wrong, I will know it because I hate being uncomfortable. And so many people, God bless them, are the grin and bear it type, where they're like, oh yeah, like I'm just gonna like go along with this, and I'm just going to like, this is fine. Like I have, like my ankle is progressively getting worse, and it's fine. Like they just don't even really, or it's staying the same, and they just go with it. And I think that it can be the same with our homes. And I mean, I'm sure with relationships, people are like that all the time, right? Where they're just like, oh yeah.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. When you said that, though, when you said like your discomfort averse, I just, for whatever reason, got a picture of like a rock in your shoe, and how so many people would just like keep walking. But it sounds like you are the person who would stop and take that rock out of your shoe because that is uncomfortable. But it's like, how many of us would just keep walking with that rock in our shoe because it takes effort to then stop, take said rock out. I don't know why that was the visual that I got, but I saw it. I don't know. But yeah, I definitely get that. And I'm like extra excited to be talking to you because you're bringing so much stuff to my awareness. Obviously, I watch your YouTube channel all the time and I love you so much. And just like be having these conversations, I'm like, oh yeah, that is reality. The gifts do stay underneath the tree. And the house is a nightmare on Christmas Day. And what is that about? Is that about not knowing where to put things? Is that about, it's like, it's almost like cleaning. Like, even though it's new, fresh, new, fun things under the tree, it's almost like, oh, well, now we're cleaning and we're putting things away and there is nowhere for them to go. And I have just never given any of that thought. So thank you for having me as part of this conversation.
Well, and you know what else is interesting? Like when you mentioned the rock in the shoe, another thing came to mind because I will sometimes go for a walk around like a local lake here. I've gone with you, I've gone with our good friend Natasha and other people.
Yeah.
And I always get like a piece of wood or a rock in my shoe. And and for a long time, so that's a perfect analogy because now this is where it's different. If I was walking alone, every single time I would stop. But because sometimes I'm with somebody else, I'm like, I don't want to bother them and make them stop. So I don't want to stop and take that rock out of my shoe. And I think it's the same with a lot of things in life, whether it's relationships or dealing with the clutter in our homes, because a lot of people, they're afraid of rocking the boat in their house when it comes to clutter. Like so often people are like, oh, I don't want to, or, you know, my family's going to bug me. Like my family, when I first started, we're always like, oh, you're going to declutter everything. And I'm like, well, no, I'm not. I'm getting rid of stuff we're not using. And I'm not even touching your stuff. I'm mostly touching my stuff. And that's the thing. I think a lot of us, so in preparing for Christmas and like all of the extra stuff that comes with it, I think, and part of the thing too is it's a very busy season, and a lot of us are not managing our time well. We're prioritizing things that don't necessarily need to be done. Like for me, all of the things for Christmas, pretty much I'm like the only one that cares about a lot of it. And I've watched a little bit less Christmas shows this year and baked a little bit less, and my family does not care. However, if I was the type where I had, and I remember once we met this lady and she had her whole house, she basically said she regretted the amount of work that she had put into Christmas over the years because her kids had such high expectations. And I think that makes total sense. And for us, when it came to gifts, we had set huge expectations. Because my husband's love language, I'm not blaming him, but his love language is gift giving. So he always felt like he was never giving enough because that was how he felt like you had to show love. And so the kids for years, I think they probably expected that. But we actually gradually over a few years just started giving less. And it was okay.
Mm-hmm. I love how you were very quick to say I'm not blaming him.
I'm
not blaming him. This is not blame at all. Just an observation.
Yeah.
Just an observation. Yeah, that is a real thing for sure in my family too. We got a ton of gifts growing up, and gradually it has definitely changed. But it is, yeah, like differing expectations. And circling back to the rock in the shoe, how you wouldn't want to stop and take the rock out when you're with somebody else. Yeah. And then, yeah, just noticing like the ripple effect of our actions within like our family unit. And how you've watched less Christmas shows and baked less and no one else really cares. I'm so sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm saying to myself, like, yeah. And I think part of the problem was like we went to Vancouver one weekend and then the very next weekend we went to Victoria. And so, and you know, during the week I'm working. So I just was like, oh, I'm not getting that in. And so that's why this past weekend I made very, very intentional about filling my own Christmas bucket because I was like, I will regret not. Like I would for sure. And I just did a workshop on this whole thing in the Untangled membership about Christmas and planning for next year because I had like such big regrets one year on like December 22nd, right? Which is 11 days away from when we're recording this. So I'm like, I gotta get that. I need to make sure that I'm kind of like doing that because as nurses, and this is like the whole point of like why I feel so passionate about people not living in cluttered homes is that we have seen so many people's lives end early or just end in general, and quite often they're not happy. Now, I don't know what any of their homes look like. I've never seen a patient's home, but I just know that a lot of people aren't happy. And I know that for me, my environment is such a huge, important part of my life. And even, you know, say that your messy, cluttered house, or just a cluttered house, not necessarily messy, but say it's cluttered, and that is the rock in your shoe. And when you finally stop and take that rock out of your shoe, how amazing is it, to have? Like when you're like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that for however long, decades or whatever, I have, well, decades, it could be in a lot of cases, yes, but years, I have been walking around with this rock in my shoe, living in a cluttered home and not recognizing just how much that was impacting my own day-to-day life. So getting prepared for the gifts that are coming and recognizing that maybe every year, it's like with weight gain. I'm in my mid-40s now, and it's much harder to sort of lose the Christmas pounds. Before I would eat I was baking this weekend, right? And as a kid, I would eat 10 of whatever every day. Nothing.
10 of whatever.
10 of whatever. Yeah. I made magic bars, which are basically graham cracker crumbs mixed with butter. Yum. And then you pour sweetened condensed milk over top, then coconut, then butterscotch chips, then chocolate chips. It literally is just like you just take a bag of sugar and pour it. And it's so good. David, he was like, oh my gosh. I'm like, not good? He's like, too good. And I'm like, yeah. And as a kid, I would have been able to easily eat a bunch of that and then have a can of Coke and nothing would have changed. And even 5 years ago as an adult, it would have been like, oh, I gained a couple pounds, gone in January. It's not the same now. And it's the same with clutter, right? It's not going to go away. You get more and more stuff every year, every Christmas, every birthday, every garage sale, every time you go shopping, whatever. If you're not taking out, then you're not making room for what's coming in. I mean, it's really just simple math. But at the same time, I think one of the best things is even if you're listening to this video or podcast, watching, whatever, on the 24th of December or even later, just that awareness is so helpful to say okay, wait a minute, stuff is going to be coming in. And I don't know about you, but you might have an idea of what some of those gifts are going to be sometimes. And so you can kind of prepare for that. I actually know what I'm getting because I bought them all myself.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's exciting. Congratulations on getting everything that you ever wanted. That's the best. I love it. Yeah, I mean, just thinking about the air fryer, that was really but you've just made me think about, it's like you said, before you bring anything in, you think about where it's going to go. I tend to do that for the big things. I'm noticing in this conversation, it's okay, the air fryer, I know that's hefty, it's heavy, it's large. Where is that going to go? But I don't have that mindset for the little things, quote unquote, little things. And having that mindset would be so helpful. And I noticed even when you said, about imagine if clutter was the rock in your shoe and then you declutter and you're oh, as you said that, I took this big breath of oh, that would feel so nice not to have. Because I have gone for years just being oh, it doesn't affect me. It's just there. It's no big deal. And then I notice that when I do declutter in a certain area, because if you notice, I keep looking around at my kitchen that's right there. And I'm yeah, I could definitely do some decluttering there. Because I notice that when I do, it feels so much better. So yeah, I'm digging this concept right now about just thinking about everything that comes in and imagining where that's going to go, no matter how big it is.
Yeah, that's just it, no matter how big it is. So one of the things on my wish list is a Harvest Right freeze dryer, which would be amazing. And you can freeze dry so many things. I think you can freeze dry just about anything that doesn't have fat in it. You couldn't freeze dry butter because it takes out the water. And our freezer, I was kind of fighting with it. I decluttered it in the summer, which is a terrible idea because then I was fighting against the heat in the garage. But I was in there and I was okay, moving things around. And I'm if this was freeze dried, and it reconstitutes really well a lot of the stuff. I grow celery and things like that. And I always was celery is my dream thing to freeze dry. But those things will save space in there. And it's the same thing. Like one of the things I considered getting would be like a half a cow or a quarter of a cow to feed our family. We don't have room for that. I'd have to buy a new freezer to do that.
Sorry, I was picturing like an actual cow.
Okay. Right, half of a cow just like walking down the road. Or a quarter. What quarter?
It doesn't even make sense. Got it.
Poor Lindsay. She's like
also
yeah. And so like that, it's the same thing, right? Like you wouldn't buy half a cow and not have room. So, and even like say I want to get that freeze dryer, I straight up know exactly where I would put it. I know exactly what like table I would have for it and everything, because I know like I'm not going to dream of something that doesn't, that wouldn't fit in our house. But even I like the idea you said about the little things, because last year I needed, we had like these, like the nonstick frying pans. And like once the coating starts coming off, it's like, ooh, what is this going to do to me?
Not good.
And no. And I was like, I want to get rid of these. Like I was so tired of always having to deal with that. Like, you know, they only last a little while. And part of my thing with like, with minimalism and decluttering is less waste. And if I'm going through these, like, I don't really feel good donating something that is like peeling what could be potentially, you know, carcinogenic or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I ended up getting a couple of new frying pans, and I was like, I definitely will be, of course, like decluttering those ones that were peeling, but like, what else can I quickly look at in my, and same for you right now. Like, you're like, okay, I might be getting a couple of things for my kitchen. What could you do to just make a little bit of room right now?
Totally. Yeah. I'm trying to think of like what else I put on my Christmas list. I also love that I'm a grown adult who makes a Christmas list every year. Here's my wish list, Mom and Dad. They ask for it though. So
my mom asked.
Okay, good. Yeah. Like, not just me, right? We're all still a lot of us.
I want to list from people. My kids didn't give me one.
Oh, wow. That's tough. Yeah, I definitely need lists and appreciate lists. So yeah, I'm thinking of like what else is on them. But even, yeah, there is just so much. I remember one of your videos where it was just like super quick of going through like that, like a corner cupboard of like what little appliances and stuff or Tupperwares and stuff don't I use. I could totally do that. And it would, one thing makes, okay, just wait. Here's what I'm thinking. In my head right now, I'm thinking get rid of one thing to make room for one thing, but that's not really minimizing or decluttering, but it is helpful, right?
Yeah, because it's not like the whole, I see Christmas for a lot of people as survival. So you're just not making it worse. You know, I go back to the like, you know, weight loss or whatever, because like for me, I just don't want to make things worse.
Okay, no, yeah.
And I think that if you can get yourself a box and you like, yes, of course you can like make room for your air fryer. You can also just say like, okay, I'm going to go in this drawer or this cupboard and pull out something. And it depends on the type of person. If you're the type of person who's like, I want to declutter for 10 minutes, then do that. Some people, they're very attached to everything. Like they really struggle to let go of anything. And I say, okay, maybe set your goal as like 10 things instead. It just depends. And, you know, and like, that's why I have like the Untangled membership, because a lot of it's the mindset stuff where they're like, like they just feel paralyzed to let go of anything.
Absolutely.
But when preparing for Christmas, for sure, especially like, I think the kitchen is a great way to start, a great place to start. Kitchen, closet, you know.
No, I think that's so helpful. That just helps my mindset too. That just like takes the pressure off around Christmas, that it's like, it is just like about not making things worse. That feels like so much better than thinking I have to get rid of like 10 things for every one thing that's coming in, or it would feel just so good to get rid of one thing for every one thing coming in, and just know that like, okay, I didn't bring in an extra however many things I get. So that definitely helps. It just helps it feel less overwhelming.
Yeah. And you know what else I think is really interesting? And we were talking about this like with regards to your relationship coaching, but that Christmas, it kind of just amplifies everything.
Doesn't
It amplifies the good, it amplifies the bad, and it amplifies the clutter in your house. Even me, as I consider myself to be, I often use the term reasonable minimalist. And then somebody I can't remember her name, I think it was Eliza, in one of my lives, she said minimalist light. Because I was like, yeah, like I have my hobbies, I have my cooking, I have all these things. So I have some of this extra stuff that a lot of people who are call themselves minimalist would be like, I don't have that. However, even though I have decluttered like a lot of my house, even right now, I feel that little bit of extra stress that things feel a bit more cluttered than normal. So it almost like in some ways in our group, we were talking about like what to do during the holidays. And I say like, like you can hold steady. If you're decluttering like 15 minutes a day, try to keep that going. If you're not and you're like, oh, I'm just going to wrap presents during that 15 minutes, that makes like total sense. At the same time, I think that it also makes sense to just say, like, I feel uncomfortable with the level of stuff around me. So I'm actually going to declutter a couple of things. Like, on top of, like, I want to say on top of, in addition to, but like making room for stuff, but also because you're like, I'm a little bit uncomfortable right now with the stuff around me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I am totally just in relationship world. So that is my lens. That is what I'm always thinking about. So yeah, I've just been thinking about for weeks now of just how, like you said, I've been talking about how Christmas holidays just amplify stress and good feelings or like happy feelings, hard feelings. It amplifies everything. So I think in saying like everything you just said, also like having so much compassion for ourselves in this time of if it feels, because this is what I say to my couples that I work with and individuals that I work with, if things are feeling big and more overwhelming than usual and you're feeling more stressed out, just like that makes sense right now. Because we are just fed this message that everything's supposed to be perfect and joy filled. And we see the highlight reel on social media, which I've talked about, I think is like so fine because we do get to choose what parts of our lives we share. And for most people, they're not going to share the arguments or the really messy parts of their house or the really cluttered parts of their house, which I think is so beautiful. And keeping top of mind that it is the highlight reel and all of these pressures from society and all the things do make just makes everything feel so much, can make everything feel so much bigger and amplified. So with the clutter, with relationships, with all the things, just like compassion and grace in this time. Just for all of our hearts.
I love it. It's so true. So my advice, my request to anybody listening who is just like, like, first of all, if you expect any gifts coming in, I suggest you just declutter a couple. For every person that might give you a gift, declutter one thing or two things, and then look how far you got. And start with stuff you don't use. I mean, if it can be like such I don't know. Like for me, like in a way, I'm like, it doesn't seem that crazy. And maybe it's because my kids are a bit older now. At the same time, it's like, if I just go and find a couple of things, declutter them, you're already on the right track for setting yourself up for an easier go. At least with cleaning your house afterwards. Wouldn't it be nice to just be like, oh, everything's like put away. Great. That's the best part.
Mm-hmm. And just when you say that, of like, just seeing you say that and that you're like excited about that. Like if you decluttered two things, because for me, sometimes I'm like, well, what's the point in just doing two things that's not really getting anywhere? But to see you being like, you're setting yourself up for success and this is like such a good thing. And it's like, oh yeah, two things is better than no things. Like you actually are making moves. It's a real thing. So yeah, celebrating like those small wins that are actually big wins probably.
Absolutely. And I always say like, because I hate plucking my eyebrows. And for the longest time on well, I still sometimes say it in videos, but like, I'm like, it's just like plucking your eyebrows. Like, you'll get there. At one point, you'll be like, well, I've got no eyebrows left, right? Like, and I always tell people in my group, I said, like, if you decluttered half an hour a day in a year, that's 182 and a half hours. Even 15 minutes a day, that's like 91 hours. Can you imagine? That's a lot.
Impressive fast math, man.
Well, no, I've done it before.
Okay.
Literally, I'm going off of memory, and I might be wrong. But and so imagine if you spend 90 hours decluttering your house, you probably would be done. Especially if you were being like realistic about what you keep and what's a full body yes versus a no, all of that.
Totally.
So
even just start.
Yeah, just even a little bit now. Like and what we're talking about next week about resolutions is going to feed in really well to this. So that's going to do it for today. Now, you can find me at my website, minimalisthome.ca, or Instagram at minimalisthome, please. Lindsay, where can we find you?
Instagram is the place for me at loving.with.intention for all sorts of relationship tips and so much fun. I love it so much. So yeah, I would be stoked to have you join me over in that community.
I've never met somebody more passionate about relationships. This has been amazing. This has been so fun. Now, if you are listening to this, please rate and review. I would really love to get a couple. Thank you so much. If you are my friend, I want you to rate and review. Anybody listening, if you're on YouTube, comment, tell us what you think, and we will see you next week. I hope something great happens for you today. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Bye.
Goodbye.